Hello there, it's Monica from Life is Art, and I'm going to show you today how to make this Happy Mail folder. And so it's a tri-folded folder, front and back, and I've put it together with this ribbon that I attached with an eyelet to the spine on this side of the folder. Merry Christmas. It's got nice 3 sections of design. On the inside back flap, you have another 3 sections with the diagonals. On the inside, you have a main center focal point, embellished that way. And then in this grid of 3 by 3, the outside corners have pockets that you can tuck lots of little treats in. These outside corners are crisscross pockets, and these are just little angled tuck pockets. And then these are pockets that are open from this side, and this is how the angled ones work. You can tuck things in there. So this is a fun way to share lots of little treats and goodies in a nice little manner. And then to include a letter into your Happy Mail, there's a spot on the back where I've put this band, and you can write your letter and tuck it under here. And I've attached it at the top, the center, and the bottom. So you could also include little stickers or note cards or things, as well as your letter. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is to score our base cardstock for our folder. And I'm using this blue, 12 by 12. And I'm going to score it at 3 15/16, which is just shy of the 4-inch mark. And I'm going to score it at 4 1/8. Right there, 4 1/8. And then I'm moving over to 7 7/8. If you have a scoreboard, you can use that too. And I'm also going to score it at 8 1/8. And these score lines make the little spines on the front and back flap that allow you to add goodies into your folder. I'm going to turn it 90 degrees, and I'm going to lightly score it at 4, just very lightly, just so I know where that line is. And I'm going to lightly score it at 8. If you don't want to score, you could also use pencil and then erase it later, but I don't mind it having the little score mark like that. Then we're going to crease along our score lines. Start with the first one. Use your bone folder. Crease it down. Go to the next one, and if you encourage it from the back side before you fold it, you'll get a cleaner fold because it's such a long score line. Again, crease it with the bone folder. We're going to fold the back flap over now. Just encourage it down and crease, and then we're going to fold the next little crease line. And there we go. That's the base for our folder. So it will fold up like this. Okay, and we'll set that aside. Next, we're going to be doing some cutting. So I'm bringing in my cutting board, and we're going to fold the first page of we're going to cut the first page of our cardstock. And so first we're going to cut off 1/4 of an inch off the bottom. Just like that. And then we're going to cut at 3 3/4. So now we have a piece that's 3 3/4 by 11 3/4. We're going to set that aside, and then we're going to cut it at 3 3/4 again. So we have another piece that's 3 3/4 by 11 3/4. And then the final piece we're going to cut at 3 1/2. So it's a little narrower than the other two. And so now we have 3 1/2 by 3 3/4. And we're going to set that aside too. And this is our leftover scrap to use for something else. Then we're going to bring our second page of cardstock in. And I'm using the same color because this is all for the matting. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cut 3 3/4. And then I'm going to turn it 90 degrees. And I'm going to cut at 3 3/4 again. So I have a 3 3/4 inch square. And we are going to cut 9 of these from this piece of cardstock. So there's our first one. Again at 3 3/4. That's our second one. 3 3/4 again. That's our third square, and this little piece is a leftover scrap to save for something else. So now we're going to cut another strip at 3 3/4. Turn 90 degrees. Cut at 3 3/4 again. And 3 3/4. And a final 3 3/4, and that gives us 6 squares so far, and a little piece of scrap. And then this last bit we're going to cut at 3 3/4. This is extra scrap. We're going to set that aside, and we're going to cut 3 more squares at 3 3/4. So now we will have a total of 9 squares cut at 3 3/4, and this is extra scrap to set aside for something else. So those are our 2 pieces of cardstock that have been cut. And now we're going to move on to our first page of pattern paper. And I've chosen this pretty blue paper. It helps to have a pattern that works pretty much any direction that you put it. The back side of this is pretty too. It's kind of an ombre. So the first cut we're going to make is at 6 inches. And then we're going to turn the paper 90 degrees and cut it again at 6 inches. So we have 2 6 by 6 squares. And we'll set that aside. Our next cut will be at 3 1/2, and we're going to cut all the way down 3 1/2 inches, and we're going to turn 90 degrees and cut at 3 1/2. So we made a 3 1/2 by 3 1/2 inch square, and we're going to cut 2 more of those. So we're going to cut again at 3 1/2 and 3 1/2 again. But this last square, we're going to put on the diagonal, line it up with your cutting line, and we're going to cut it from corner to corner on the diagonal, just like that. So now we have 2 3 1/2 by 3 1/2 squares, and our third 3 1/2 by 3 1/2 has been cut on the diagonal. And we're going to set those aside. And then this last piece of paper is 2 1/2 inches wide, and we're going to turn it 90 degrees, and we're going to cut it at 4 1/2 and 4 1/2 again. And this leftover is scrap, and we have 2 pieces that are 2 1/2 by 4 1/2, and we're going to set those aside. And then we're on to our last piece of pattern paper, and I've chosen this green sort of plaid-ish one. And our first cut for that is at 3 1/2 inches. And we're going to turn it 90 degrees, and we're going to cut another 3 1/2 by 3 1/2 inch square. And we're going to repeat that twice. 2 more times. Another 3 1/2, another 3 1/2, and this little part is extra. We can put that aside. And this square, we're going to cut on the diagonal again. So line it up with your cutting ruler. And then this square we're also cutting in half diagonally from point to point. So from that strip we got one 3.5 by 3.5 inch square, and then our other two 3.5 by 3.5 inch squares we cut diagonally. We'll set that aside. Our next cut is going to be at 3.5 inches. And then we're going to cut it at 10.5. And this is extra, and we're going to set it aside. And then we're going to cut another one of those. So we're going to cut it at 3.5 inches. And then we're going to turn it 90 degrees. And we're going to cut it at 10.5. Again, this is extra for another project. And this last strip of paper is for the tuck flap on the back of our folder. So we'll put this over here with the other pieces. These last two pieces that we cut, that were 3.5 by 10.5, we're going to score those. On the back side, we're going to line it up on our mat. And we're going to score it at 3.5. And at 7. Okay, so we're going to do that again with the other one. We're going to go on the back side, line it up on our mat, and we're going to score it at 3.5 and 7. And then we're going to bring back our paper cutter. And we're going to cut from the score line down to the outside point, and then from the score line to the outside point on both sides. So we're going to tip it, line the score line up with the cutting line, line the point up with the cutting line, and we're going to trim that. And this we're going to use, so set that aside. And then we're going to take and we're going to cut from the same edge as we did before. So we're going to turn it this way now. We're going to cut from the top of that score line down to the point. And again, we're using this. We'll set it aside. And we're going to repeat the same process with the other one. So we're going to take it and we're going to cut it from the score line to the point. So we'll tip it this way. And again, we're going to use this. So we're putting it aside. And then we're going to tip it the other way and cut from the score line down to the point. Save this for later. My trimmer away. And now we want to fold on that score line. And this score line. And that makes one of our pockets. So we're going to do the same with this one. We're going to fold on the score line. And then take this side and fold on the score line again. And then we'll set that aside. Okay, back to our base piece of paper. We have the inside, so this is where the two flaps come over. And on the inside of the center, we're going to bring in our cardstock that we cut in all of these nice little squares, and we're going to glue them into the grid that's on this paper. So apply some adhesive, and I like to start in the center, and you're going to be lining it up horizontally on the score lines. So it's going to come right up to the score lines on either side, but center it between the light score line or pencil marks that you made here so that it's in the center of its grid. Now we're going to adhere this cardstock again right up against the score line, but leave a nice bit of the base showing at top and bottom. Now we go to the bottom one. Line it up with the score lines. And then we'll move on to our other 6 squares to apply. So this is matting for all of those interior pockets. So again, we're going to line it up, and this time it'll be right on the score line, leaving a little bit of the base cardstock showing on the outside edge. Making sure to try and keep it lined up with the previous one that you put over here, so they're nice and lined up in a grid. Down to the bottom. And we'll go to the center again on the left-hand side. And this one, you don't have to be right on the score line. You can back it up a little bit so that it makes everything even from side to side. Those little spines that we left allow us to fill our things with goodies. Oops. Line it up. Rub off the extra adhesive. And our last one. And there we go. Okay, now moving to the front. Remember these 3 that we cut that are long. There are 2 that are the same width and 1 that is narrower. So we want one of the wider width ones, and we're going to adhere that centered on the front. That's the mat for our front cover. And then we're going to fold over our back flap, and we're going to pick the other one that's wider. I believe it was 3 3/4 width. And adhere that to the back flap. Leaving a bit of the blue showing all the way around. It's very tight squeeze, but it'll go. And then we're going to flip it over, and we're going to adhere the 3.5 inch wide cardstock in the center at the back. And there we have it. Okay, now to decorate the front, I've got one of my squares that I cut, the 3.5 by 3.5. And this is our front flap over here. So I'm actually going to turn it this way. So I've got the inside, and I fold this over, and that way I can line it up evenly with this matting here. Just pretend that I'm putting it in the center of the mat. So it's not lining up exactly, but it's where this one will have something inside of it. And then I'm going to take one of the two triangles for the front that I cut. And I'm going to adhere it to the top. And then I'm going to take the other triangle that we cut for the front that matches that same center square. And I'm going to adhere it like this. And that way we have sort of a diagonal stripe going on our front cover. So that's what our front cover will look like with the diagonal stripe. Now, we're going to add two of the triangles of our coordinating paper to finish up the squares. And one at the bottom. I like the liquid adhesive for doing this because it gives you a little bit of wiggle room to position it how you want. So that is the base papers for our front. Now we're going to flip over to the back, and we're going to use the square that we cut in the alternate paper. As the center of our back. Again, we're going to use the interior ones as a guide to line it up. This time we'll do the diagonal this direction, just for variety. And we're going to use these little triangles that we cut. All right, and now we're going to use the back side of this paper that we cut off of our crisscross pockets to add some detail on the back. Got that one good and crooked. And again, this other one at the bottom, we're going to adhere that to the bottom. And if you noticed on this one, in the joins here, I added a bit of shimmer trim. So you can add foil tape, you could add a zip strip, you could add an alternate paper color, anything that you want. You could just do glitter glue to add a little bit of something extra there. Okay, now we're going to the inside, and we have these two crisscross pockets that we made. We're going to put a line of glue on the bottom of the center pocket and fold one over. And then we're going to put glue on the bottom of the other flap and fold it over. And that makes our crisscross pocket. We're going to add adhesive to the back. And that's going to go in the upper right corner, centered on our mat, just like that. The second pocket, again, we're going to put glue just in a strip along the lower edge. Going to fold the flap over, add more adhesive on this flap, fold it over, and I alternated the flaps just so that they kind of mirror each other. Add some adhesive, and this is going on the lower left. like that. All right, now we're going to bring in these 2 pieces of paper that we cut and to make the pockets for the top and the bottom. And these were the pieces that were 4.5 by 2.5. Okay, so we're going to score them. To make the folds, we're going to score it at 1/2 inch on 3 of the sides. So 1/2 inch in from the left side, 1/2 inch in from the right side, and 1/2 inch in from the bottom. Okay, we're going to do the same thing with the next one. We're going to score it at 1/2 inch in from the right side, 1/2 inch in from the left side, and then 1/2 inch up from the bottom. And then we can take our scissors and we can trim out those corners. Now I like to do it a little bit more than right on the line. I like to go a little bit farther so that there's no overhang when we fold. We're going to do that to both pockets. Just cutting up to that scored intersection. And then we're going to fold all those edges back. Oops. And again, fold all our score edges in. And the last one. And then we're going to adhere them to our base at the top and the bottom in the center. So just apply a little bit of adhesive on each of the flaps. And then we're going to adhere them at the bottom, centered in our mat. And that makes a nice little pocket. Just going to put my bone folder there to make sure it gets a nice tight glue. More adhesive on the other one. We're going to adhere that at the bottom. Just like that. Okay. Now we're moving on to the envelopes that are going to go in the upper left corner and the bottom right corner. And so what we want to do is we want to flip them over to the back side. And I like to use my grid mat for this because I'm going to line up the points at the center, the 6-inch mark all the way around. So just get it so that it's all centered in the right spot. And then from the 6, we're going to go 1 3/4 inches out from the center. And we're going to score there. And then we're going to go back to the 6 in the center and we're going to do 1 3/4 inches out. If you have an envelope maker, you can by all means use it to make a little 3.5 by 3.5 inch envelope. I don't, so I'm doing it old school. So now from the 6 horizontal, we're going to go 1 3/4 inches out from the center. This is a good method to know if you have to make a envelope for a weirdly shaped card. So again, from the center, we're going to go 1 3/4 inches out. And score it. And now we're going to do that same thing with the other card. Line it up at the 6s. Make sure it's nice and straight. And then vertically, we're going to go 1 3/4 inch from the 6. And on the other side, starting in the middle again, 1 3/4 inch out. And then we're going to go horizontally from the 6, 1 3/4 inch. And then from the center down, we're going to go 1 3/4 inch from the center. And then like we did with the other pockets, we're going to trim the corners out, just to the intersection where the score lines meet. And again, I trim just a little bit, a smidge more than the score line, so that we don't have any overhang when it's folded. Just go all the way around. I know there's some lovely envelope makers and they have a little punch on the side and it does all this work for you. But I always figure it's a good skill to know, especially if you're a card maker, as I say, and you might have an oddly shaped card that needs an envelope. It's nice to be able to create your own. Okay, so we've gone around all the corners. And now we're going to fold on those score lines. Creasing it nicely with the bone folder. Okay, and now we're going to fold our edges, our sides in. Put a little bit of adhesive there. And then we're going to apply adhesive to the bottom flap, just along the edge. And we're going to fold it up. If you want, you can round the top flap. And there you have one envelope made. Second one, we're going to fold in all of our flaps. Just like that. We're going to apply some adhesive to adhere those side flaps into themselves, and then some adhesive on this lower flap just along the edge. And that is envelope number 2. So let's bring in our base again. We're going to apply adhesive to the back of our envelope. And we're going to adhere it. And then our second envelope, we're going to apply our adhesive to the back, and we're going to put this one in the lower right corner. Just like that. And now this remaining 3.5 by 3.5 inch square, I'm going to apply adhesive to the back of that, and that's going to be in our center as our focal point. And these remaining 2 triangles are going to become our tuck pockets on either side here. So we're only going to apply adhesive on the 2 outside edges that join at the 90 degrees. We're not going to apply any adhesive on the angled side. So just a thin line of adhesive. And then attach it to the matting. And again, we're not going to do the angled side. I always like to put my thumb where I'm not going to put glue. That reminds me not to run glue over my thumb. And then we're going to adhere that there. And that makes a nice little tuck spot as well. And that's our inside done. And then we're going to turn the whole thing over. And we're going to apply this to the back. And so what we're going to do is we're going to score it a 1/2 inch in from either side. So we're going to make a 1/2 inch score line here and a 1/2 inch score line here. And we're going to fold those in Bring our base back in. And we're going to apply glue. Now when I did mine, I also decided to add glue right in the center so that I could have 2 tucks. That's up to you whether you decide to do that. And there we have that. And that is our completed base. Now you can decorate it any way you wish. You could add little Velcros here to keep these envelopes closed. You can do a focal point here. You can do fussy cutting. You can add flowers and whatever you want to do. But then tuck all your nice little goodies in. And then you're going to fold the back over and you decorate this. And fold the front over it and you'll decorate that. Add a tie if you want. And that is your Happy Mail folder, all complete, ready to go, to fill with goodies and send to a friend. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Thank you from Life is Art. Bye-bye.